Hi, welcome to the September 30th, 2021 Inspiring Author Conversations. I'm Kathy Davis with Davis Creative Publishing Partners. Today we'll be speaking with Krystal Weigl. Before we welcome Krystal, I want to first remind everyone of a few logistical details. The call is being recorded. You will receive a link to the YouTube video within about 48 hours after the call. Your attendance at these meetings serves as your permission to be seen in the recordings. Please mute yourself on your end so as to avoid any background noise. And please find your chat button down at the bottom of your screen. Type your questions into the chat box and we'll try our best to get to those by the end of the call. We promise to end the call around noon so you can get, well, actually it's going to be 11:30 today. Thank you. Back to business, so you can get back to business. Our theme for 2021 has been inspiring authors. Each month, we welcome guests who are either an inspiring author or someone who helps to inspire authors. And today, Krystal fits both of those categories. So help me welcome Krystal Weigl. Hey, Krystal.
Hi, Kathy.
Krystal's a practicing attorney, writer, and daydreamer. She has dedicated her career to making the law more accessible, approachable, and useful to those who need it. She's passionate about making the legal profession a healthier and better place for its professionals. The highest client praise she's received is that she's a different type of lawyer. I love that. Krystal also writes fiction novels about hopeful, strong-willed women, works on her soon-to-be-launched wellness initiative for lawyers, and attempts golf. She contributed to the recently published anthology about Ruther Bader Ginsburgs' impact, Living My Truth, and she's currently working on a historical fiction novel that takes place during the Irish Revolution. She also plans to write a book about her initiative, Hustle Less, all of which I can't wait to hear more about. Each one of those we could talk at least for half an hour about. You currently live in St. Louis with your husband, Andy. So tell me, Krystal, when do you find time to write?
Well, whenever I can. I am not someone that's very structured about when I write. I've heard a lot of make sure you do this, make sure you at least hit this many number of words or minutes per day, and that has never worked for me, so I don't do it.
Well, I love this idea, this concept that I mentioned earlier. You're doing historical Irish fiction
Yeah,
about the Irish Revolution. So I'm guessing that tells me there's a bit of Irish in your heritage.
yeah, a little bit. My mom's side came from Ireland,
Ah,
so I got to go to school there. I've traveled there many
wow.
times. And I don't know that there's anything more hopeful or optimistic or mysterious than
Mhm.
Irish folklore. So loved incorporating that into this mystery novel that I'm working on.
So is there going to be a castle? I've always been attracted to castles in Ireland and the big wavy acres and the hills and the mountains. Yeah.
We've got a lot of that. This one doesn't really involve anyone royal. This is kind of an underdog story. So the only castles are more like the prisons that were being used, which
Okay. Well, yeah,
not quite as romantic, but a little more gritty.
that's amazing. So when you were in school in Ireland, was that for college?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
I went to the University of Limerick. I actually got to study Irish history there, so which is kind of a hobby of mine, anyways.
So that's when you caught the real bug.
Oh,
Yeah,
for sure,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about some of the other things you've been working on. What is this Hustle Less project?
That is a passion project of mine. Without too much backstory, I have found that even though I decided I was going to be a lawyer when I was 4 years old, I have struggled immensely with figuring out what my place is in this profession, how I fit in, what I can do to benefit my community as an attorney. And I've found through that struggle that a lot of the things that I'm having a hard time with are not because of me. so so
Mhm.
that's been very validating. I am a great attorney. I really enjoy everything that I work on with my clients, there's a lot of systemic problems. And so it's easy to want to walk away and say, this place is kind of a mess. And I have a hard time with that. And by this place, I mean, like, the legal system as a whole.
Mhm.
But the cool thing about that struggle is that I've been able to see there's a reason why I'm challenged by it. The reason that it makes it hard for me is because it's so very important to me. And so I've found that whether I'm writing fiction or I'm working on a wellness initiative or I'm writing an homage to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the amazing part of the story is the struggle, is the part figuring out, what challenges me? Why do I get so worked up about these things? Which is really just asking, what am I passionate about?
Mhm.
So
Do you have, no, go ahead.
So to answer your question a little more directly, the wellness initiative is, let's cut out some of the hustle culture going on here and be a little more purposeful with our practices and our professions. And that's launching this fall. So really
It's
thrilled.
all about balance. And yeah.
It is, and it's about listening to what's important to us. I didn't have any idea that I was supposed to figure that out on my own. I thought that a lot of other things around me were going to tell me what was important, what I needed to be better at. And because I was so focused on that external validation, that external messaging, really wasn't focused on why I was here. Like, what's Krystal doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of a massive mindset shift for me.
It sounds very similar to the conversation I used to have with myself when I was in corporate marketing. I was Bank of America, Nations Bank. Then before that, it was Boatman's here in St. Louis, if you've been around long enough to remember Boatman's. And it was a similar conversation. It was like every time I drive in the morning, I think, I just don't feel like I fit in here. How do I balance this with my values and my goals? And then eventually I did just end up working for myself. So it was I was downsized. So it was one of those forced early retirements that I went, oh, cool, let's do this. And so I was not the least bit unhappy when that occurred. But so when you're looking for inspiration for your stories that you're writing, do you read other authors? Do you have any favorite authors that you read?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So yes, but I love reading history. So sometimes what I read, I've read cool historical fictions. There are so many great authors out there. Oh my God, it's like impossible to even give you my top 5. I would just have to look over at the bookshelf, but, because they all fit there. But I love, I think that history gives us so much guidance and there's so much parallel, when we're internalizing those messages of, do I belong here? Is this for me? Thinking that there's something wrong with us. We think everything is new. Like, we're the first people or the only people that feel this way. And like everybody else, they already knew. So when we were writing about Ruth Justice Ginsburg, man, that, a perfect, such an incredible parallel to those struggles that we all face, even though she was an absolute giant of a historical figure in so many ways. Like, yeah, I actually relate to that a ton, which is pretty cool. So
yeah, she was quite the firecracker.
Right. Just amazing. So yeah, I try to read as much of history as I can because I do love that analogy of there's nothing new under the sun, right? We're all still learning, we're all still struggling, and that's valuable.
Well, it's great to hear that you're writing in that genre. I remember reading recently in 2020 through quarantine, book sales increased by 35%. And the topic or the genre that was most read was novels and historical fiction. So there's like a huge following for that genre. And I guess quarantine kind of brought people said, well, I'm going to read what I want. I've got this time now. Let me read something that I really enjoy. So I was kind of curious that you mentioned that. Yeah, you're in the right genre to have a big following. So
That's awesome. That's so.
So what do you find that you do when you're not writing?
Oh gosh. Well, I pick up I kind of joke, but it's not really a joke because it's true. I pick up a new hobby like every season. So I do try to golf still. That's been a long running hobby. I do like to run. So whenever I try to get like a 5K in per month, which was kind of a tough adjustment when everything closed down because
Yeah.
I need the crowds for motivation.
Mhm.
I need to see 100 other people running to get my brain to
If you slow down, you get trampled. So you got to just keep running. Yeah.
exactly. It's really motivational to see, the rest of everyone else just making a break for it. I like to sew. I try to do that. Gosh, I every time I see some cool new hobby or if a friend asks me to go try something else, I'm there. Like, yeah, let's do it. That sounds great.
The what was I going to say? The attraction of finding something new. Do you find that also rolls over into your writing? Are you able to, when you start to write a book, do you finish that one before you start the next idea? Or do you have more than one book idea going at the same time?
No, no, I do not finish. I have my historical fiction book is a manuscript that is finished. Actually, I think I've mentioned when we've talked in the past that I'm sending it off to an editor this fall. So I'm very excited about that.
Awesome.
But then there's manuscript number 1, manuscript number 2, and manuscript number 3 and 4. So I try to get my stories going anytime they come to me because it's not something I can just manufacture. I can't sit down and start a brand new story. The idea has to come from somewhere. And no matter how many times I read the advice about here's how you need to do this to complete a book in X number of days, it doesn't sit well with me and it doesn't seem to match with how I process things. So I like to give myself that kind of freedom to, this is supposed to be fun. I don't
Right.
want to participate if it's not.
I don't know if you heard there was a recent interview. I think it was Ellen that did an interview with Matthew McConaughey about his new book.
Really?
And how he wrote it. He lives in Texas. And so a neighbor, and when we're talking neighbors, we're talking like acres and acres away, had this little like old hut. And literally it was like used to be used for garden tools, but it was sitting out in the middle of, several acres and nothing else around it other than a tree and a hut. And he asked if he could borrow that hut, and he outfitted it so that he stayed like 30-40 days in this hut, and all he did was write.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, I don't know that I could do that, but that's what he needed. Every author needs something a little bit different, I'm sure. But that's what motivated him to finish his book, because he said it, like you said, it had been an idea that was just stirring, and he said I was just motivated to get it done.
Yeah. I mean, a writer's retreat, a week or so, or maybe 2 weeks sounds like something that I could see myself doing in the future. But for now, it's an absolute hobby. It's something I'm doing because it fits in well with the rest of my life. And I have no idea where this is going, which is kind of the fun bit about it. So if
I've
I'm
always said, if I were to do if we were to sponsor a writer's retreat, it would be on a beach, in the spring or the fall, so it's not too hot. And we would want to, make sure we all had plenty of free time to do what we wanted, but it would be an organized kind of writer's retreat.
yeah. Well, let me know when you get that together. I'll be there.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have to plan that together. Are there any words of wisdom you would like to share for aspiring authors? I know you have your own system of how it works best for you.
Yeah, just do it for yourself. There's so much noise out there. People will sell you any method of writing or any strategy of writing that you know, that they can come up with, and most of the time it comes from a good place. It's something that worked for them, but you you can't you just can't use those external milestones if you don't really know what works for you, or what you want to accomplish, really.
Mhm.
So for me, it's like I just do it when it feels good, and I do it when it's enjoyable, and I do it when it's fun, and that's all it needs to be for me.
Do you see a pattern in like a time of day, or a lot of authors will talk about how they have a muse or a voice in their head that talks to them after they lay their head on a pillow? Do
Yeah,
you see any kind of times of day that your thoughts start to pop in your head?
most of the time it's when I'm running. I think that that's when I get organized the best in my mind. And that can be morning, noon, or night, depending on what the rest of my schedule looks like.
Mhm.
And the rest of the time, it's when other things quiet down. So I know that I am supposed to block out time to say, this is when I'm writing, this is when I'm going to block out distractions, this is when I'm going to turn my phone off. But that's not really where I'm at in my career or my personal life right now. So I have to do what works for me. And that's pretty random.
Yeah. Barry's got a question. He jumped on the call here just as we were talking about the writers retreat. Barry, just to fill you in a little bit, every now and then, probably about once every other month, I guess, I get asked if we're ever going to do a writers retreat. And um, I'm taking suggestions as to what that would look like. In my mind, it would be on a beach with a lovely breeze and the ocean sounds behind us, because I tend to get motivated by that. But at some point, we will send out an email requesting information about what a writer's retreat might look like to those people that open up the email and that are interested in being a part of one. So we'll make that one of our goals for 2021.
I
Yeah.
love it.
If I could um, weigh in on that, for lack of a better term, if you could, as you're planning it, it's a wonderful idea. First of all, thank you for contemplating it. As you're planning it, could you make it as inexpensive as possible if it's going to involve travel? I know the beach is a wonderful idea, but
And my first thought is maybe we'll go to Lake of the Ozarks, or, I find someone that we know that has a location, or even someone suggested we rent a house that has several rooms where everybody could have their own room and
yeah,
have a writer's retreat that way. And
yeah,
we'll work out the details. Definitely the first one will be a lot closer than one of the either east, west, or southern coast beaches, but
good.
and then once that becomes a success, then we'll move a little further. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you for that input. I appreciate it.
Next stop, Yaddo.
That's right.
Yeah, you're familiar with Yaddo?
No.
It's a famous writers retreat. It happens, I don't know, once a year or something, and it's a big deal. But I don't know where they meet. It's somewhere at some facility, like out in the woods or whatever.
If you want to type that name into the chat box,
Sure.
we'll look it up and we'll research it.
Yeah,
There's a couple of groups here in St. Louis that do local writers retreats, and we'll probably start with that too. Yeah. So, Krystal, when you sit down to write, how long do you take? Does it differ depending on what's in your mind or what your schedule's like? Do you find that, your mind just keeps rambling and you're there for an hour or more?
If I can get going, it'll be a couple hours. Sometimes I'll get interrupted in the first half hour or the 1st hour, and then, it's time to move on to the next thing, because I'm not at a point where this is the way that I'm able to finance my life or support my family. So those things come first. And then of course it's, I once I get going, I can keep the ideas coming for a long time because I find it really enjoyable. But it's a matter of like, all right, get these ideas going so that you can get some steam behind it.
Well, and I find for me, it's like I have to get it on paper somewhere, even if it's beside my bed, so that I don't forget this idea.
Oh
And then I
email
try and
chain.
collect all little pieces of paper together to go, oh yeah, that's what that is. Do you write by hand in a spiral or are you on a keyboard?
I'm pretty much always on a keyboard because I've always got with me.
Mhm.
That's the one thing that I know that I'm going to have with me, whether no matter where I'm at. So it makes it a little easier to keep track of things.
Yeah, definitely. So of the ideas that pop into your head that you've been writing down about all these books that you're working on, can you share with us before we leave, what was the most fascinating experience that you've had in that almost amazed you in as the story started building in your head and just flowing out?
Mhm. I love every time I can start to hear the characters talk.
Oh, wow.
Anytime that someone, I'll start writing a scene and I'll get kind of a vision for what it's supposed to look like. And I'll start hearing these conversations just take on a life
Wow.
of their own. There's a really cool movie that I saw years and years ago about Charles Dickens, and I believe it's called The Man Who Invented Christmas. And he he sees the characters come to life in the movie, and I thought, oh, thank God, it's not just me. Okay.
I'm not the only one that hears voices. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So once I've given my imagination enough rein to allow these scenes to start coming to life, it really does feel like you're just listening to the characters communicate, and they've got their own accents and their own way of thinking and their own dialogue to contribute. And then, once you get to that point, it's just a matter of getting it on paper.
So the audience that you're writing for with your Irish historical novel, is that an adult audience or a young adult audience?
It's an adult audience. It's an adult-ish main character
Mhm.
who's really struggling with being hopeful, being optimistic, feeling stuck, things like that. Um, and so it plays with time a bit between the present and the revolution in the 1920s overseas. And so I kept it adult because the struggles that I've experienced are adult themed. And so it's not something that I think really reaches a much younger audience.
Mhm. So one of my thoughts is, we haven't really mentioned anything, but one of the new titles that you're getting ready to add to your list of many is New Mom. And have you started having thoughts about what it would be like to do a children's book?
I love children's books. I really do. I actually find them super inspiring too. I think children's books are some of the hardest genres to write
Mhm.
because you have to take these really complex ideas and make them palatable and approachable and communicative to such a young audience. So maybe if I become a better writer, if and when I'm able to synthesize all these complex ideas that I'm currently struggling with,
Mhm.
that'd be super cool. But it's not something that I think I'm ready for or equipped to handle right now.
We'll give you a year.
Maybe my daughter will teach me how to do it.
Yeah, that's right. You'll just start getting ideas. Um, and I hear this from a lot of children's book authors. The ideas come from having conversations with your children
I
and in watching their perspective on life. And like, oh my gosh, that would make a great book. I remember years ago, my daughter asking me, what's the phrase? All of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. And she was about 3 when she said, Mama, why are they so mean? And that's when it went, oh, bingo, there's a book there. But then not long after that, somebody else came out with that book called
Yeah.
Olive, the Other Reindeer,
Oh, I
and
love that.
how mean she was to Rudolph. Yeah. Yeah. So when those ideas pop, that's a really good example of jump on that idea before somebody else does. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also just, let yourself have ideas, even if they don't turn into anything crazy. Because, if we're always focused on what is this going to turn into? How much revenue is this going to generate? How am I going to get this published? Those those ideas stop coming because we're fighting them. We're not thinking about the idea anymore. We're thinking about the outcome, and that's not the point.
Yeah. So for this Irish historical novel that you're working on, do you already know what the ending is, or are you waiting for it to come to you?
Yeah, yeah. This is actually a book I started. It's a manuscript that I started writing in 2017. It's been in the works for a long time. I've put hundreds of hours into this book, and querying it and everything else that goes along with it. The fun thing that I like about the ending that goes along with exactly what I said is that it's not real satisfying. It's not a cliffhanger, but it's not an ending that you go, oh, that was what I was waiting for to feel good about this story.
So does that mean you're rethinking the ending?
Mm-mm.
No.
That's that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
It ties in perfectly to I think my whole personality about, why do these things matter? They matter because they teach us things about ourselves, not because we've got this product or this end result that somehow brings us this incredible closure.
Well, and I hear so much lately, with everything that's going on here in the US, and a lot of the news stories that I listen to anyway are reflecting back on history and talking about what were the lessons learned in similar situations previously that we can bring forward, and rather than relearning them, take a look at them and say, what can we learn from this? Yeah. Now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know we've had a few extra people join us. I want to apologize for everybody for the late notice. We had a calendar issue this morning, and we had to start a half hour earlier. So my apologies if that messed with everyone's calendar today, but we have been recording the call. We've had some great conversations with Krystal. I want to make sure if anybody has any specific questions for Krystal before we start to wrap up, please just raise your hand and jump in. We've been talking about her Irish historical novels that she's been working on, and we've been talking about some of the other books that she has. Maybe that would be a good conversation starter. Now that we know that your novel's getting ready to go to the editor, what would be the next book that you think you're going to focus on?
I have a book. It's a fiction. So, gosh, which one do I want to focus on, I guess, is the question. The one that's closest to being a complete manuscript is a fiction novel about a young woman who decided to leave her profession over a lot of external factors. Very familiar story, particularly to me, and is called back for reasons that are more true to herself than the external factors were. So it's taking the struggles that I've experienced, putting it into a character, and really going through why it matters. It also brings to light some issues about sexual harassment, some current events, and there's a mystery element to it as well. So I think all of my stories until I become a different person are going to be about strong-willed young women that keep doing things that they think they can't do when they find out they're actually important.
I love that. Do you know Tim Sansone?
I know the name, yeah.
He's an attorney.
Yes.
What do you call it? A appellate attorney in his.
Attorney, yeah.
Yeah, he's an appellate attorney. And I'll send you a link, or you can look out on Amazon. He wrote a novel for his daughter when she went off to college.
Yes,
And
I remember this.
It was and his theme was women's empowerment, because he could see how, his daughter was starting to get a little intimidated about leaving home and the security of home and going off to college. And his original goal was to write a series of 3 or 4, I forget the exact number now, but and so he's got one under his belt. I need to reach out and say, okay, Tim, where's number 2 and 3 and 4? But
yeah, no, that's great. They always, one bit of advice I like that I have heard is write what you know. And I think I would just take it a step further and say write what's important to you, because that's when I write things that don't matter to me, when I try to do things in life that don't matter to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think especially after the last 18 months, Do what's
Absolutely.
important, do what you value. Because
Yeah.
you never know what's going to happen next. Literally, you never know what's going to happen next.
Well, and what's the point of doing the rest of the stuff, right? Like, I don't have to.
Yeah. So what a great way, what a great last message to give is do what you love and do what you know, and that's awesome. Well, Krystal, I always love talking with you on these interviews, and I love your insights and information that you're willing to share with everyone. And I wish you well over the next 3 weeks. Gosh.
Yeah, we're getting close.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's awesome.
Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for the kind words. And as always, thank you for the work that you do. Absolutely love it.
You're quite welcome. And keep us posted. There'll be lots of people wanting to know the outcome, and make sure you get home safe and sound in that lovely pink room that you're sitting in. Yeah.
You got it. You got
Yeah.
it. Thanks for your
Well,
time, Kathy.
thank everybody for being here. We'll see you next Thursday.
Thank you, ladies. Have a
Okay.
great week.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Joanne. Bye-bye.
See ya.